welcome to a new episode of History by Bike. And we won't be going around on a bike today, but instead we will make our video right here where I live. So make sure to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And our new topic for today will be about these silver coins, Philippine silver coins, and it will be about the Great Manila Bay silver operation that occurred during World War II, in which millions and millions of these coins were dumped into Manila Bay by the American authorities. So let's start our new video. Okay, so when World War II began in our country around December of 1941, what the authorities did, the American and the Philippine authorities did, was to evacuate our reserves. So this means paper money, Philippine gold bars, Philippine silver coins, and some other securities, stuff from the treasury, and they were transported from Manila to the American base at Corregidor Island. So at around 1942, come 1942, the Imperial Japanese were already making a foothold in Manila, and the authorities were getting wary about these precious goods. They had to devise a way in which to somehow dispose of them, if not transport some of them, like in the case of USS Trout, the US submarine that went to Corregidor and then taken in the Philippine gold from the treasury and then transported it all the way to Pearl Harbor and then to the mainland United States. So this is the type of predicament that the officials had to contend with in order to secure the safety of these valuables. In the late summer of 1942, when the Japanese had been in control of the Philippines for several months, their occupation currency suddenly began to collapse. Japanese soldiers found that a month's pay wouldn't buy so much as a glass of beer. The cause was a mysterious flood of silver Philippine pesos that began turning up in the markets of Manila. Somehow, the silver was reaching even the prisoner of war camps. American prisoners were bribing demoralized Japanese guards for food, clothing, and medicine. Next, they would start buying freedom. If the source of the silver wasn't found soon, it could corrupt the whole structure of Japanese control. Where did the silver come from? The Japanese knew that MacArthur forces had dumped millions of pesos into the deep crater south of Corregidor before surrendering. There was $8,500,000 of it down there, lying at a depth of 120 feet. A diving crew of 7 American prisoners of war had been put to work salvaging that fortune. It would be a gift from the army to the emperor. Japanese security police were watching the American divers, guarding every peso recovered. It seemed inconceivable that any of this silver could be smuggled into Manila. Nevertheless, the Japanese decided to tighten the guard over the Americans. It had all started in the early months of 1942, when defeat in the Philippines had become inevitable. Quickly, Philippine government officials and U.S. Army officers decided to save the Philippine national treasury. They recorded the serial numbers of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of paper currency, then burned the bills. In February, some $2 million in gold bullion and $360,000 in silver were shipped to San Francisco in the ballast tanks of the submarine USS Trout. But now, time and the enemy were moving fast. There was no way to get out the rest of the treasury. 17 million silver pesos, each worth 50 cents, still lay packed in wooden boxes in a steel vault on Corregidor. On April 20th, U.S. Army officers drew 2 straight lines connecting well-known landmarks of Manila Bay on a map. The lines intersected at a point in the water on Caballo Bay, formed by the thin crescent of Corregidor's curved tail. There, the water was deep and rough enough to discourage enemy salvage. There, the treasure would be dumped. Lieutenant Commander George G. Harrison, commander of harbor craft in nearby Mariveles Bay, gathered up a working party. A dozen Navy enlisted men, orphans from the submarine tender Canopus, and submarine rescue ship Pigeon, sunk in Manila Bay. Most of them were divers. Harrison told them Corregidor's days were numbered. The job had to be done quickly and at night. It was back-breaking labor. The heavy boxes, each of them holding 6,000 pesos, were wrestled about 2 flat-top barges, which were then towed to the dump site in the bay. There, the weary sailors began pushing the precious cargo into the sea. It took 10 nights to move the 425 tons of silver to the floor of Caballo Bay. When the job was finished, Harrison turned the men loose with a prophetic warning. If you are captured, don't let them find out you are divers. On May 6, Corregidor surrendered. The divers were among the captured. 6 weeks later, the Japanese commandant of the prison camp at Cabanatuan, 90 miles north of Manila, sent for bosun's mate first class Morris Moe Solomon. "We know you are a diver," he said. "Manila Harbor is choked with sunken vessels. It must be cleared for traffic." The Japanese had excellent intelligence. Besides Solomon, they had singled out bosun's mate Virgil L. Jughead Sowers, Wallace A. Punchy Barton, P.L. Slim Man, and 2 other experienced divers. So let's get back to the submarine USS Trout. So USS Trout had already gone to Corregidor and taken in the Philippine gold out of the country for safekeeping into the United States. But there are still a lot of Philippine silver coins that are still in Corregidor. So the amount was something like around 16 million pesos, 17 million pesos, and they had to find a way to dispose of these coins, these valuable coins, without the Japanese knowing that the Americans had done it. So what they did is that they scrounged a work party of Navy personnel. Some of them are divers, so they are experts in salvaging. So what they did is that they found a spot nearby Corregidor, which is Caballo Bay, which is just to the south of Corregidor, and it was a good spot to dispose of these coins, since it registered around 120 feet deep. So they found it suitable for them to dispose of the silver coins into Caballo Bay. It actually took them around 10 days and nights, since they were trying to do it without the Japanese spotting them.
On the train to Manila, the enemy's stern attitude changed. Smiling guards gave each man sandwiches and cigarettes. In Manila, they were ushered to a clean room in a building near the docks. There were a locker and a cot for each. They were very important prisoners indeed. A Japanese civilian in a seedy-looking suit entered. He wore a horseshoe of grayish hair around his bald head, thick glasses, and a huge smile. He looked like an actor in a bad movie, but his voice, soft and high-pitched, was friendly. "I am Mr. Yosobe," he said. "We will be working together. I am a little too old for driving, but I have had 20 years experience in salvage work. Come meet our officer in charge." Captain Takeuchi greeted them, a pleasant youngish man. He came from a wealthy Japanese family and spoke perfect English. He told the men they would be given a roomy boat to live on at Corregidor and were to make themselves comfortable. "No one will molest you," he promised. "There will be no guards. You are to consider yourselves on professional assignment." He said they would be working in shallow water, only 30 to 40 feet. The next morning, Yosobe and two Japanese guards showed the men the U.S. Navy diving gear the Japanese had found: several shallow water helmets and 24 suits of long, heavy diving underwear. The men didn't like the look of the equipment, nor did they like the 60-foot boat they were to live on, an old bucket tied at Corregidor's North Pier. The cabin was already serving as a dormitory for 6 Filipinos, hired to tend the Filipino divers who had been salvaging boxes of silver for the Japanese since the end of May. 18 boxes, $54,000 in silver, had been recovered. The Filipino divers, the Americans learned, had never worked in deep water before. They had stayed down too long, come up too fast. 2 had died in the agony of the bends. Early one morning, Yosobe showed up with 2 Japanese soldiers and hustled the Americans and the Filipino tenders aboard a small fishing boat. They chugged slowly around the east end of Corregidor, then pointed toward Caballo Bay. In the distance, the Americans saw a flat diving barge. It was anchored directly over the place where they had dumped the treasure. In a few minutes, a motor launch approached and put a big, tough-looking, impassive Japanese aboard the diving barge. This showed that he was a Kempeitai, a member of an elite Gestapo-like army organization. An ordinary soldier might be bribed, but a Kempeitai, they knew, was incorruptible, intelligent, and answerable to no one for his actions. He could shoot them on the spot, no questions asked. The Kempeitai's first act was to end the yarn that they would be salvaging sunken ships. He spoke to Yosobe in Japanese. "Your orders are to salvage the silver dumped here before the surrender," Yosobe said to the Americans, smiling. The divers had planned to tell Yosobe they knew nothing of such silver, but a look at the Kempeitai changed their minds. They did, however, tell Yosobe their diving plans. They would spend only 15 minutes at a time on the bottom. Coming up, they would decompress for 2 minutes at 30 feet, 3 minutes at 20 feet, 8 minutes at 10 feet. Surely you can work longer than 15 minutes a dive, Yosobe argued. That's plenty of time with this gear, Sowers said. You've lost 3 divers already. You want to kill us? Yosobe, a gentleman, had vivid memories of the way the Filipino divers had died, and he did not want to see those death agonies again. He shrugged. The Americans fastened a 40 feet length of cable to a bollard, tied loops in it 10 feet apart, and dropped it over the side. There was a belt-like strap at the end. When a diver found a box of silver, he was to loop this strap around it and 2 Filipinos would winch it up. Sowers was the first to make the first dive. He got into the helmet and ran the air hose and lifeline beneath his right arm and grabbed the cable strap.
Later on, when the Yusufe forces surrendered to the Imperial Japanese, there came a point in time in which the Japanese themselves found out that there were indeed coins lying on the bottom of Manila Bay. So what they did is they looked for those US Navy personnel that were involved in the disposal of the coins. So where did they find them? The Japanese found them, of course, in their prison camps. The ones in O'Donnell, some from Cabanatuan. So they enlisted the help of these Navy personnel to assist them in the recovery of the coins. Actually, they first took in the help of some Filipino divers, although some of them, well, due to the danger of their work, some of them died. They recovered some coins for the Japanese, but the Japanese weren't that satisfied with the amount that was recovered. So what they did was they looked for the American personnel who were involved in the initial dumping of the coins in Manila Bay, and well, that's what they did. Oh, by the way, actually this is not actually a Philippine silver peso. This is just our Philippine centavos, by the way.
Then he let himself into the water. It was warm and calm. Slowly, carefully, Sowers inched his way down the descending line, a thick Manila growth anchored to the bottom. A 20-foot circling line was attached to the bottom of the descending line. Sowers tied it to his waist and moved slowly toward the hill of silver. He looped the lifting cable around the box and gave 3 tugs, the signal to the Filipinos to haul it up. 15 minutes later, he climbed aboard the barge. When he got his helmet off, Sowers began to grin. Yosobe and the Kempeitai were paying no attention to him. Both were on the smaller vessel, standing over the sweating Filipinos, ordering them to move the box of silver to the rear of the boat. The Kempeitai stationed himself next to it and indicated that he would guard it with his life. He decided that the job was going too slowly. The only answer was to find more divers. At Cabanatuan prison camp, the Japanese picked out 3 more veteran divers: torpedo man Robert C. Sheets, bosun's mate George Chopchick, and carpenter's mate H.S. Anderson. All were old shipmates of the divers in Caballo Bay. When they came on aboard, the old hands explained the setup, then showed off their quarters. The old hands told how the system worked. The Filipinos who manned the air pumps were allowed to visit their families in Manila. The Americans had studied them carefully, tested them with snide remarks about the Emperor of Japan. Finally convinced of their loyalty, they told them that they were stealing silver. Would the Filipinos help distribute it? They would. The pump hands found some Chinese money changers in Manila who were glad to exchange Japan's paper occupation currency for Philippine silver at a black market rate that undermined the yen. Ultimately, they got so much silver into circulation in Manila that the rate of exchange fell to 30 to 1 and nobody would have anything to do with the Japanese occupation currency. The money was used to buy supplies to smuggle to American prisoners of war. The Filipinos helped themselves to large commissions. The Americans felt they deserved it. They were risking their lives. The day after Sheets and Chopchick arrived, Yosobe had the living boat towed to the South Pier, closer to the treasure site, to speed up the work. The Japanese sailors were likely to inspect the living barge on a moment's whim, but that day at least they would be too busy. Skies were darkening and the seas were running high. The sailors were making ready for a storm. The next day, Takeuchi and 3 armed soldiers probed every inch of the living barge. The divers followed them, expressions of outrage hurt on their faces. "We've worked hard for you, Captain," Mo Solomon said earnestly. "Now you act like we're thieves or something." "I think it is highly possible," Takeuchi snapped, "that you are thieves or something." Takeuchi was burning when he led his inspection party off the barge. He hadn't found a single peso. The Americans knew they hadn't fooled him. He knew they were stealing the silver and was determined to find it. The next morning, their fears were confirmed. As they prepared to dive, the Kempeitai suddenly appeared on the diving barge. He spoke in Japanese to Yosobe and began stripping. "He is going to dive," Yosobe said. "He wants to see what you have been doing on the bottom." The divers glanced at each other. This was the finish of them all. The Kempeitai could not be allowed to return from the sea alive, but they too were doomed. The enemy would accept no excuse for a Kempeitai's death. The Kempeitai was fitted with a helmet and started to descend into the water. Sheets tended the lifeline, Barton the air hose. When the Kempeitai reached bottom, Sheets planned to rip off the helmet. The Kempeitai grabbed the descending line and started down. But after moving only a few feet, he started up again. Out of the helmet, he got into a huddle with Yosobe. "Kempeitai has claustrophobia," Yosobe explained to the divers. "He can't stand the helmet, and he has decided you have not been doing wrong on the bottom, or you would not have cooperated in sending him down." The diving continued until late autumn, when the silver recovery program came to an end. By then, it was obvious to the Japanese that the silver was coming from Caballo Bay, but they would never admit even to themselves that it had been stolen by the American divers. The Americans could never have gotten it past their Kempeitais. The security police now reported officially that all the silver in circulation had been taken from the boxes washed ashore in the typhoon. The case was closed. To keep it closed, they canceled the silver recovery program and everyone was happy, especially the Americans.
Alright, so I hope you enjoyed our topic for today, which is about the Philippine silver coins that were disposed of or dumped into Manila Bay nearby Corregidor Island. And I hope you learned something new about our World War II history in the Philippines. So this is where I'll end the episode. So please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And this is History by Bike signing off from Casa Fortes. And thank you very much for watching.